Thank you for tuning in to the World Builders Anvil, episode 338. Is Rogue One the best Star Wars movie there is? Let's find out.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build. Welcome back. Critical as always. My name is Jeffrey W. Ingram, talking very fast.
And talking a little bit slower and an absolute pushover when it comes to loving science fiction. I am Michael Miller.
What does this episode have to do with science fiction?
Because we're
slam.
space fantasy, space opera.
Yeah, I'll still always argue to my death. This has nothing to do with science fiction.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
Science fiction elements to make you feel like you're in space.
Like I know, I get it, but still, it has that. For a lot of us in our generation, Star Wars was the first real step into science fiction movies, right? Or like maybe E.T. You know.
Was he
maybe
before or after? No, that was after. That was like
it was after, but you might not have seen Star Wars. Is my point. I mean, my probably first foray was like Black Hole, maybe Tron. I'm not sure.
Awesome.
I'm not sure which.
Older, but I'm a little bit older than you, I think.
You are, but not much. But I just don't know because we're going so far back. I don't know what I saw first.
What order these things happened? Yes,
right. I do know
Star Wars first because my mom was a huge Star Wars fan.
I do know that I saw Jedi in the theater. I may have seen Empire in the theater. I'm not sure. I can almost guarantee I did not see Star Wars in the theater.
Empire in the drive-through.
Nice.
And the same thing with Star Wars, probably. I don't really remember. I was much younger when Star Wars came out.
Okay. Before we get into this, because certainly there's a lot of things to unpack here, I feel that Rogue One is a lot denser than some of the other Star Wars movies. But I want to do shout-outs. It's been a few episodes, and I know I'm doubling up on some names here. So if you've heard your name before, then great. You get 2 shout-outs. So people who have joined the closed Facebook group on the closed Facebook group on Facebook is what I was going to say. Yeah, that's me. I said that. So the Fantasy World Builders Undercroft, you can find us on Facebook. It's a closed group. When you attempt to join, when you request to join, it's going to ask you 3 questions. The answers to those questions don't really matter. So if you don't want to give us, there is an option to opt in on an email mailer list. That's fine if you don't want to do it. But please answer the questions, because we have found a number of times we've denied people that we believe, they put the request and they want to join the group and be a part of our community, which is fantastic. But if you don't answer those questions, we deny you. It's so that we avoid getting bots in the group and people that are just trying to advertise. So please answer the questions, even if what we really love is when you answer the questions funny. Like, you don't have to take those questions.
Yeah.
You don't have to take those questions seriously, except what is it? Question 2 is the one. Yeah.
Like the important one is the one that asks you if you will follow the rules of the group and not be a spam bot.
Yeah.
If you answer no to that or ignore that question, you will always be denied.
Yeah.
Email question you can completely ignore. Or tell me to go F myself. That's awesome. Or throw a joke in there.
Or throw a joke in there. We love it. So we have had to deny some people, and I hate that, because I feel like I don't want those people who have requested to join to feel like they're not welcome, because you guys are all welcome to join. So if you did get denied, it could simply be because of that technical issue. Please try again, and as long as the questions are answered, we'll let you in. So anyway, people who have recently joined and are thanks for joining. I'm going to say this is Mavry or Mavry, Braden, Sky, Carl, Mackenzie, Rebecca, David, Hope, Alexander. I believe this is Jailin, Ives, Ollie, Lizzie, Jane, Renee, John, Brian. I believe this is Kieran, Ryan, Matt, Kendall, Nathaniel, Willer, Michael, Justin, and that is the entirety of my list, and that goes back to August 5th. So if you joined between August 5th and June 8th, then or I'm sorry, I went back to June. I read those in opposite order. So June 8th to August 5th. And we won't be doing another shout outs for a few more episodes, maybe not until the next season drops, because we're doing a lot of recording this weekend. So thank you guys for joining.
I'm probably not lying here, but I want to say I think Carl might be Carl's Jr., the hamburger guru.
The
so
hamburger
if you want to
guru.
know the secrets to Carl Jr.'s food, it's another reason to join the Facebook Undercraft. And
You're probably lying. You're probably lying about that. You're probably lying about that one. So this episode's been a long time coming. Jeff and I, you may have noticed, I don't think we have like harsh opinions about our fiction. I think we have a passionate perspective when it comes to things that we really enjoy about science fiction, fantasy, our movies, our games, our video games, our comic books, our tabletop stuff. Like, we just love this stuff. And Rogue One has a special place for me for a number of different reasons.
both of us.
Part of me wants to, like, I just want to just jump into all the things that I like love about it, but I also kind of want this to be organized. Yeah, like I could just go on and on. We're going to try to.
I'll put some perspective here for people who don't know Michael. Michael was a producer in I think New Britain. I'm not sure. It was some city. I think it was Britain. When you used to be a producer.
New York. And actually, to be fair, the highest that I got to was line producer, which is not exactly the same as a producer.
Well, it's kind of like the intern of producers, but
no, because there are such thing as interns, such producers. There are. I was like a production manager, line producer.
He actually has some like knowledge of how to like make these things where I have none. I can think about things from a story perspective. He has different criteria than I do, and his are much more geeky in a complimentary way towards.
Yeah, but you know what? When I come to my love for Rogue One, it's not really. It really isn't. I mean, I can respect what they've done technically, but I don't think that they did anything.
That's not what makes it good or bad.
Exactly, and honestly, I don't think they really did anything technically in that movie that was a jump from any other Star Wars movie. You know. So anyway,
no better than Star Wars, the first one.
So my thing about this, and we've talked about it before, we've mentioned it and hinted at it, and we've been working our way to this episode for a while, is a lot of people are going to say, what's the best Star Wars movie? And they're going to say Empire. And for the longest time, I would have argued the same thing. And I will say that it is a very close distinction. But my argument against Empire is that Empire is the climax piece in a 3-part story. And while Empire is still a great movie to watch by itself, it is made better within the context of being the middle piece of a 3-part story.
Yeah, the trilogy itself is a story. Yeah.
Rogue
I would
One.
argue Star Wars is the best. Sorry.
Do you mean A New Hope?
A New Hope, yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I don't call it that. It's called Star Wars.
I know, but they throw. But we need to clarify for the audience, because they say Star Wars in front of all of the movies, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners didn't grow up with it the same way we did. They might have always grown up with Star Wars: A Phantom Menace, Star Wars: The Clone Wars. You know what I mean? So Jeff is clarifying, when there was no such thing as Star Wars, the only thing that we knew was Star Wars, and later it became known as A New Hope.
Yeah, and I would just argue that it is the best because everything else is actually technically a derivative work. And I think, they maybe had some sketched outlines of what they wanted the first trilogy to look like. But ultimately, Star Wars was a piece made as a solo movie because they had no clue that it would become what it did, or if they'd even ever have a sequel. But all the rest of the work is technically a derivative work, which I don't find to be a bad connotation, but some people do.
Yeah, but see, that's
created this thing.
I'll tell you what. To that point, I have a counterpoint that basically is the same as that, but opposite, and that is Rogue One can only be as good as it is because of what came before it. Like it has built on what's But I think using the word derivative is kind of dismissive.
Well, it's because people think of it that way, but I think of it more in the form of calculus, where it's simplified down. But the idea is, even Empire, does not have its standing. It's not a great of a movie if there's no New Hope. New Hope started the jump, and so
agreed.
I give it its prop as the most important one, because without it, all of the rest didn't come. Even that stuff.
Now, I have some very skeletal notes here and lots of things that I can think about and talk about. So I apologize to you guys because this is not as organized as I would normally like to do a media episode. I would normally like to lay out our notes better, but we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants for this one, which is fine. So one of the things that I love about this movie is some of the themes in it, and we've been doing a lot of talking about theme lately, and they really ham-fist this one in the movie, but I'm okay with it because
it's the forced plot. Yeah.
Well, no. Well, it's not forced. But the theme of a father's love in this movie, I feel like it comes home and really hammers it home way better than any other Star Wars movie has done. Yeah. Like, the original trilogy is about the redemption of Anakin Skywalker. So that
son's love.
It's all about the son's love for the father. And you look at the growth of Anakin from, child to, Padawan to Jedi. And then as he becomes a father and doesn't really get the chance to be a father to Luke or Leia. So I don't really look at Anakin as a father. He didn't ever get to really play that role. He thought
I'd even argue the same thing with in the sequel with Han Solo and Leia and being the parents. In that sequel, they never really played those roles because you miss that, and you get to the son who's lost, and it's the father and mother fighting for the redemption of their kid, which is a different story.
Quick aside on that one. There's a part in the movie where Chewie has a deadlock on Ben after Ben kills his father, and he's going to shoot him. And it's like, well, he could totally shoot him in the head and be done with this. Like, what happened? He raised his thing and he shot him in the stomach. Somebody created this cartoon. It's probably pretty easy to find, little web cartoon, and there's no words in it. It just shows Ben Solo as a child. And you think about that. That's something that we didn't get in the movie. But Ben Solo as a child, and what was his life like? Well, he had Chewbacca. Like, he grew up with Chewbacca as his uncle, as his surrogate uncle. So he's right there. Like, he and Chewbacca would have had a tight upbringing, right? So he's raised with his mom and Leia. His mom and dad were together until they weren't. He's got Chewbacca right there the whole time, presumably. So you have this tight relationship that isn't really picked up on in the movie. It's not something that they
didn't develop.
They didn't develop it at all, but you have to assume that occurred, right? Mm-hmm. So you figure Chewbacca loved Ben. Chewbacca helped raise Ben. He probably helped train him in combat to some degree before he went under Luke's wing to become, a Jedi. And then, like, Ben starts getting emo and dark and having tough times, and maybe Chewbacca and he lose some of their closeness. And cut to the movie where you see him hesitating. When we watch that moment, we're like, why isn't he just shooting him? Just shoot him. And we're not considering that this is like almost a son to him too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I thought, wow, what a great concept. What a great idea. So the things like that, those emotional attachments, like Jyn Erso's father to her, the missing love that, like, he loved his daughter so much and it constantly impressed that upon her. I think one of the reasons that Galen Erso is the way he is because he has seen how hard this world is, this universe is. Mm-hmm. He was, a scientist. He was recruited to build war machines, and he made
bombs.
He made bombs, and I think he had his moment of humanity where he was like, I don't want this kind of future for my family, for my, I have a daughter. Like, this isn't this. How can I stand here and be this man when I love this little girl so much? I have to be free of this. So he leaves the Empire. We cut to him getting reconscripted in the Empire at the very beginning of the movie. And again, he is expressing his love for his daughter, his love for his family. And and he wouldn't have had to give them up if his wife hadn't attacked them. Now, that would lead to a very different story. A wife being really kidnapped into the Empire again, with their daughter in tow again. You know what I mean? So that would lead to something very different. But I think one of the biggest themes here is a father's love for his child, which they never hit that as well in the other movies.
Well, I think one of the strengths of that scene, and I have issues with it too. But I think the strength of it is oftentimes, especially in movies where Star Wars is very black and white, Empire is evil, the rebels are good, and that's the way it's ham-fisted to you. But the thing is, it did something that the other Star Wars movies I really haven't seen as much. Maybe in the sequel trilogy they do a little bit more, where they try to humanize the villains to a degree that they're not all Palpatine. And sometimes you forget that from the outside. You kind of think of Palpatine and Vader and Darth Maul and and that
Sidious and what did you say?
The emo one.
Oh, the emo one.
But it's like you sometimes forget that it's like, and that's one of the things I liked with the idea of I can't remember his name, the reformed stormtrooper for the sequel. Good God. What those movies are.
Yeah. Finn.
Finn, yes. One of the things they really missed an opportunity with, that could have been the greatest role ever. I feel so bad for him because that character really was this idea of, what if they are just people under the mask sometimes? And they're forced for whatever reason into this life. And Star Wars, I think Solo maybe started to hint towards that a little bit. And maybe the original Star Wars too, with the idea that Luke was going to go into the Empire. That was his dream, was to join the Imperial fleet and be a pilot for the Empire. So it's like, it's something that kind of disappeared. And I kind of argue in a way, one of the problems with the sequel trilogy and why none of those movies can rise even close to Rogue One is they watered Star Wars down into the memes of Star Wars, flying through the asteroid field. And, there's just certain things that you have to have because it's the cultural information of Star Wars being passed along in the movie, but it loses the depth. And the great thing is with this first scene, even though once again, to me, it's like, let's just do this like plot where, okay, dad gets taken away, the mom is killed, they shoot the dog, and off the adventure begins. But really, the execution, I can't deny, was impeccable, I thought, in this movie.
From the very get-go, with this conscription, we also get the concept that no other Star Wars movie has done as well, is really putting the war in Star Wars. This is a war movie. Like, if you watch old war movies, I know Jeff's a big historian buff. I don't know if you watch or enjoy World War I and World War II movies. I do. This movie plays a lot like those movies. It is showing you boots on the ground. And I don't mean boots on the front. I mean boots on the ground. This is a war that is not just a war of fronts, but it's also a war of people and of society and culture. You get people who are oppressed and dealing with this. This is how a family is torn apart. The very opening is a family being torn apart because of war. You've got one of our next really big characters is Cassian Andor. And Cassian has this great moment in the middle of the movie where he talks about, and very fervently, he is very passionate in his delivery. I love his performance. It really sells it, where he's talking about how he's been in this war since he was a child, how he's like, I've been fighting this since I was a kid. Like, I want to say he says something like 6 years old. I can't remember exactly the line, but he is, and you can see the pain and the hurt and the passion of what he's been doing. He knows he's not proud of everything that he's done for the rebellion, but he's committed because it's a necessity, because people can't live this way. We have to fight. If we don't, who's going to? Like, this war is on our shoulders. And other Star Wars movies, they're like fun adventure space movies. Not all of them, I'll give you Empire, but Empire's pretty adventurous too. But this movie, more than any of the other Star Wars movies, really emphasized the fact that it is a war. It is scary. It is dangerous. It is tense. Like, there's a lot of fear in this movie. And I don't mean fear of the dark side. Like, they barely touch the Force in this movie, which I really like.
Yeah. I'd argue like and he wasn't trying to make war movies. I would say Lucas, the first Star Wars movies, it was a space opera. It was just a dance. And there were some of the elements, the idea with the Skywalker family being wiped out is as close as it gets to this movie. And that has become kind of a Star Wars meme of the desert family being murdered by the Empire. And the fact that it has to be a desert planet for some reason, I don't know. But it's like, the idea that is fascinating, and where Star Wars kind of goes different, it's about the adventure group. So, and it always seems like in these movies, these scenes have to start with the murder of a family on a desert planet, or at least the trilogies or whatever. So
or a farm.
or farm, yeah. But the thing was, from that point on, it deviated to this dungeon dwell of Star Wars, of the adventures on the hero's quest.
Mm.
And the thing was, there were war moments. There were the Battle of Hoth, which was when I was a kid, probably the coolest thing in my brain.
Yeah.
Sort of your World War I battle, with heavy tanks rolling down on the trenches.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the battles in space, but largely it's skirmishes happening.
Mm-hmm.
You don't typically see the consequences of those. You don't see, the families of the rebels who died on Hoth. You just see a few rebels being killed as speeders go past them.
Yeah.
And,
you see the adventure-y part of it, like the closest.
The difference is Rogue One is the soldier in the trench,
mm-hmm.
Where Star Wars is the princess watching the battle occur.
Yeah, like the closest you get in the original trilogy is like when the Ewok tries to get his dead buddy to stand back up, not realizing that he's dead.
One of the most emotional war.
It was one of the most emotional war moments, right? Whereas most of it's like, oh, there's a bad guy, shoot the bad guy. We're going to do a crazy cool maneuver to outmaneuver the bad guy, and we're going to blow up their ship. It's not like that in the trench. Fear, tension, and horror of war.
And I would argue, like, the prequel was really trying to create political thrillers that happened. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily think it worked perfectly, but I think they were very watchable. The stories I enjoyed. They could have been better paced movies, but that's a different thing. And then the sequels, if I give them what I think they were trying to do, I don't really know what the sequels are trying to do, so I'm not going to even go there.
No worries. So, I don't want to belabor the point.
It seemed very, very dysfunctional. But Rogue One, the thing that it did well was it changed the perspective from, the top looking down on the battlefield to the guys in the battlefield going, how do we do it? And I think one of the strongest arguments I've heard against it being a great movie was it was just trying to explain how the Death Star plans got at the beginning of the Star Wars movies, to start the beginning of Star Wars movies, which is true. But if I removed the scene, which I liked, but because I love Star Wars, I really enjoyed that scene. But the thing is, if I take that scene out and I don't even say that this is connected at all, it's a great story. And the character of Jen was tremendous.
Are you talking about the scene where, let me see the character name, because I want to be very specific, because I had rediscovered this. Are you talking about when Mon Mothma mentions how many, I forget what race she says, a bunch of people who had died to get these plans?
Yeah, and how Leia got the plans, but yeah.
That's actually in Return of the Jedi. I found this out not too long ago. We've all been remembering it wrong. That scene is talking about another desperate mission for them to get different plans from the second Death Star in Return of the Jedi.
How did they get into the hands of
Leia? Yeah, I know, but I'm pointing out another thing.
I am mixing those things together too.
Yes.
You were right.
But I mixed them together. You're not alone. I mixed them together for like the longest time. And then I was looking it up one day. I was like trying to find it. Like, where is the scene? And then I finally came across a thing where it's like, look, everyone's looking for this scene. It doesn't exist in Star Wars. It's in Return of the Jedi. So they're not talking about the same thing. Because it was blasting Rogue One for not addressing that it was supposed to be a specific race of people banded together to get the plans, and they did, but for the Return of the Jedi one, not for the original Death Star,
that's
which is
battle.
What Jyn Erso did
Rogue 2.
in Rogue. Yeah, this is in Rogue One, in Rogue 2.5, Rogue 5, the Electric Boogaloo. So my next, not to belabor the point, I just want to put it out there. The way I like to describe Rogue One to people who haven't seen it or are apprehensive about it is Rogue One is the Saving Private Ryan of Star Wars movies. Like, it is a real war movie. Okay.
And I'd even agree, like, that scene, the big battle scene at the end, in the water.
Yeah.
It's a very chaotic scene. It's very reminiscent of the beginning.
Very sad.
Saving Private Ryan.
And the end.
There's the chaos and the end, yeah. Basically any battle scene in a more modern war movie, at least, where they try and get into the chaos and in a way it's scary in that nature, because the randomness of the guy's head, being blown off beside you in an unexpected moment. Those are the things that make war movies powerful.
All right. So my next note is just a quick character note. I have Sal Guerrera, and you wanted to talk about Sal, and I'll just let you take it.
Yeah, and my thing is Sal
Or Saul.
Saul, I guess, which would be the way his name is spelled.
I do believe that's how he pronounces it, though.
But and I think of him. There's actually a machine gun class, a Saul, which very much represents his character. His character was a machine gun tearing things down. He was a great character on several reasons. One, he was a great way to show that even though we're the good guys, we're trying to win a war, which also helps ground it into the war movie ideology where, we're fighting a war against the Empire. It's not going to be pretty. And I might have to make choices you don't agree with.
Yeah.
But I will do that to win the war.
They're not going to play fair, and we can't be honorable if we want to win.
Yeah. And I'd also say the interesting thing is they also made him a father character, which I thought was interesting because the plot was about her recovering her father, but then Saul is her father represented in the alliance. The father part of her, if her father was in the alliance, it would have been Saul.
I mean, you figure she spent more time and more very crucial developmental time with Saul than she did with her own father.
And I would argue they did it correctly because he would have become her father.
Yeah.
And the way the story unfolded. So I give cheers to them. And here's the thing I like too is Jen was an imperfect character who, due to the circumstances she was in, ended up doing something great. She learned and she fought, she struggled. She followed a hero's journey.
Reluctant hero.
She's more of a reluctant hero, I would say. But
Definitely.
This idea where, I think one of the arguments is, Rey from the sequel is a Mary Sue. And some people would jump to the conclusion that, she's just there and she did something good, so she must be Mary Sue. But I'd argue just the opposite. She was not always likable. She learned through struggle and strife to get to the point where she had the success at the time. And let's be honest, part of that was still luck. It was that situationally got her into the right place at the right time. But the thing was, her character was not overpowered. She had to learn things. She didn't magically know how to do things. And a lot of the Star Wars movies, not just Rey, the characters have this tendency to just all of a sudden know what they need to know to further the plot along. And I don't remember that from Rogue One. I'm sure there's always moments of that in any movie because you have to sometimes speed up certain parts of a story. But the sequel trilogy in and of itself seemed to always do that, where if Rey wasn't in the scene, someone else would learn it, but there was always a thing learned at the right time, at the right place to win.
But don't you think that's more of just a convention of movie making anyway? Because sometimes you have to shorthand things to keep it and sometimes they
understand
make
that.
Sometimes
when your entire plots are driven by that's when it becomes a problem.
Well, yes, of course. That's just not great writing.
Have to have that in there, especially in movies, because you only have a couple hours.
On the technical side of things, what I will say is they do sometimes do things where they'll make a scene that explains something we've been complaining about, but then it gets cut for time. So that happens an awful lot. Okay. My next thing is just a small footnote, but absolutely adds a lot of character to the movie. Is Alan Tudyk as KTSO. Lot of great funny lines, and they actually really humanize droids in KTSO. Obviously, they have they've personified droids in a number of movies. They humanize 3PO a little in certain things they do throughout the movies
as comic relief.
But see, that's me saying personify, making them like K2SO, you're sad by the time his part of the tale is over. Like I'm sad for KTSO. Like he had a lot going on. Like he had his own mini arc. Now he also had a lot of really funny. He also had he also had a lot of really funny lines that were great. And Alan Tudyk is hilarious and did a great job as his voice. I like when he's like, "Do you know what the odds are of her shooting you with that gun?" They're high. They're very high. One of the things that I love about Rogue One the most is how it takes something that I love, the original Star Wars trilogy, and makes the whole thing better. Since I don't know, the 90s, I guess, when we really started to dissect movies the way we now do all the time. It's commonplace to watch a movie and everybody tears it apart and gets nitpicky, but we didn't used to do that. We used to just enjoy movies. Now we tear them apart even if we love them. I'm certainly very guilty of it.
What are we
But
doing here?
it got to the point where somebody finally started throwing some logic at Star Wars, and they said, why is it that this gigantic space station, this super weapon, this thing they're going to use to control and hold a stranglehold throughout the galaxy, why does it have such an exploitable weakness? Why does it have a weakness that a single person could exploit with a small fighter? That is so dumb. That is such a terrible design flaw. And we know it's just so that they can make a movie where the underdogs have a chance against this insurmountable odd and they can win. But the fact that they took that foundation and said, well, yeah, I mean, what we would have called a plot hole in the 90s and turned it into something amazing by saying, no, that was on purpose. That was that was Galen Erso's biggest revenge and way to save the galaxy in the best way that he knew he could do. He's like, I make weapons. He's like, but I also know how to unmake weapons. So I am going to make this weapon in a way that it can be unmade easily. And no one else is going to figure that out because it's so complicated and I'm so much smarter than everybody else. Mm-hmm. So it takes this thing that we've been complaining about for 20 years and it brilliantly builds a wonderful story around that concept, and also all of our nice emotional layers where you've got, like I said, the father's love, and we certainly have the reluctant hero's journey. There's just so much going on there, but I love that I watch that and it makes me like A New Hope and Empire and Jedi even more, but especially A New Hope because it dovetails right into A New Hope
into the beginning, and which is a very emotional scene, especially now, with the
yeah. And
So,
we'll get to that. There's still more.
Yeah, but it's like I would argue, like, the thing I like though is if I pulled out the elements of the Star Wars trilogy, this is why this movie works better than all of the rest of them that have come since. Empire maybe being excluded is, and some of the scenes maybe not, but in general, the flow of the movie, the storytelling of the movie works without Star Wars. It could have been a great movie, a great solo movie by itself.
Oh, absolutely.
Some of them emotional like tricks they could play on us, like with the ending scenes, with Leia being captured and stuff like that. That wouldn't have it wouldn't work the way they did it. But you didn't need that plot hole in Star Wars to make this a good movie. It was an excuse they took to make it a great solo movie that was connected to the universe, but it didn't try and be Star Wars. It tried to be a war movie, and I appreciate it for what it did. And I'd say the problem is so often when they're trying to make Star Wars movies, they're distilling down what made Star Wars originally people love about it and trying to turn it into a formula that works sequentially. But the problem is the stories aren't strong enough to hold them together, where this had a great story and it delivered it well in its vein of being a war movie. And now, if you don't like war movies, you might not like this movie because they get into some emotions that you don't typically see in Star Wars movies. But I appreciate that. Even though I appreciate that Star Wars movies not being war movies.
Yeah.
Even though they could have been.
No Jedi in this movie. This movie is amazing, and there are no Jedi in it. And only a very brief sequence with a singular lightsaber.
And if you had a MMO of Star Wars without Jedi at the beginning when it launched, people would be upset.
Yeah. It's kind of amazing that this movie and the other thing is this movie feels like Star Wars, despite the fact that it's really charting its own course. It still really feels like Star Wars, but I hate to use the word gritty, but because that is such a jargon word in relation to changing a property. They're like, let's make it more gritty. Batman is now darker. Superman is now darker. Everyone's darker and it's more gritty. And I get
DCU.
that. But yeah, but it is a grittier Star Wars than the other ones. I mean, I would also say Solo is pretty gritty too.
I don't like it if they make war movies that aren't gritty. I enjoy some of the old John Wayne war movies, but their flaw is sometimes they ignore the horror of war for the glorious victory.
So covering some of the big notes on it. So we talk about like the intro, the conscription, Galen's plan, Jin passing from place to place and ending up back in the presence of Saul Guerrera, her, of course, her, meeting and association with Cassian, and they're really the rebellion's really just using her. But she goes from being a pawn in the rebellion's plan to a player in the execution of, saving the galaxy. Like, she becomes a pivotal symbol for hope and a voice for cooperation. She has some great.
Without her, there would have been no hope.
Yeah, like she's got some great speeches before they all get together and do this mission that is the conclusion of the movie. And it's great because they do it against orders. They do it against insurmountable odds. Like, it really shouldn't have. We get back to luck. It really shouldn't have been pulled off. So we have that great familiar Star Wars underdog feel, which is great.
Skills earned and developed through the plot of the story.
That's true, as opposed to just I'm a Jedi and I move magic rocks. So
and I've never left the planet, but somehow I'm one of the greatest pilots, if not the greatest, who's ever lived.
Yeah, well, that is a really solid argument. She was using Windows Flight Simulator to get the controls down for the Millennium Falcon. Anyway, so we get to like the end of the movie. The thing that I also really like about this is they really easily could have had Cassian and Jyn kiss on the beach. They really could have squeezed in a little bit of romance there, and they don't do that in the movie at all, which is great. I think
it's open so you can think that there would have been or not. It's up to you now.
I don't think there would have been. I think their relationship would have been more akin to Zoe and Mal. Mm-hmm. I don't think it would have been any sort of romantic. I
appreciate it because I agree with you there, but it still left it open for people to make the choice.
I almost wish they didn't hug, because they do hug at the end, right?
Yes, but
yeah,
that's a very.
It's a human. I get it. It's a very human thing. They know they're going to die.
Just because they're different genders, you think that leads people to...
No. But I almost think it might have been. I don't know if I would have liked that moment better because I'm building that scene in my head. If it had just been a handhold and facing oblivion coming at them from the ocean, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, just a way of like bravely facing, knowing that they've made a difference.
Yes.
I'm just speculating. I'm just riffing on it at this point. You ready to talk about lightsabers?
Sure.
One of the nastiest lightsaber scenes in any Star Wars movie ever. So good. So scary. Like, that's another one of those, boots in the trenches moments where I don't think Vader's ever looked that scary. Like, he is terrifying in that scene. You're
that is like one of the most powerful scenes of Vader.
Which is saying something, because he is so imposing. Like, in Empire,
there's a reason why he's become Vader.
He's super scary in Empire, like when the Cloud City door opening and Solo is so quick to draw on him and then fire, and he's just like, no.
And you really feel like, it's a miracle. When he starts picking up the Emperor, you're like, what the?
Mm-hmm.
I remember, and maybe because I was a kid, but at that moment, I was taken away when he picks up the Emperor, and you're like, oh my, what? This worked?
Luke actually got through to him.
Luke actually got through to him.
Yeah.
And for any son who's ever tried to get through to his father, that in itself seems impressive.
Yeah. So I thought you were going, when you said it seemed like a miracle, I thought you were going to go with, it seemed like a miracle that they were actually able to get those Death Star plans out.
Well, and that was a miracle from this movie.
Right. Well, that's the movie we're talking about, Jeff. And so I keep on target.
Well, I know.
But it's so scary, and that moment where they're like, all those guys in that hallway know they're going to die. All of them. Within like a second and a half,
it's like
they
when it
all
first
knew.
Comes, like, we're gonna light this dude up, and as soon as like he like turns it against them, the guy in the back is like,
we got to go. We just got this. This plan is more important than all of us. So then he's finally like, take it, and then they're just passing it back. It's great. We of course love Donnie Yen, and we want Donnie Yen to be a Jedi, and he is the embodiment of the Jedi in this movie. So he is the representation of the Force for us in this movie.
Happen to be a Jedi.
He just doesn't happen to be a Jedi.
The Force is here, not the Jedi.
And my wife and I have this whole thing about watching movies, and just me in general as an emotionless robot, that she doesn't get to see me cry. Like, we've been together about 11 years now, and I've told her, I'm like, honey, it's not like I haven't cried in your presence. It's just I don't point it out when it happens. But the thing is, I have family members who have died. I have had very emotional, experiences in my life. I don't tend to cry at that stuff. I cry at movie moments. Rocky 2, almost a guarantee I'm going to cry every time I watch that movie. When Donnie Yen dies in Rogue One, I cry. And I had seen the movie 3-4 times before. I rewatched it not too long ago with my wife. I tried to get her to watch it at one point, and she fell asleep. She didn't get into it. But this time I caught her in the right mood, and she was totally down, and she got way into it. She really enjoyed it. And I was like, I'm like, be prepared. I'm like, you say you want to see me cry. I'm like, this movie makes me cry. I'm like, but I've seen it like 3-4 times at this point, so it may have lost that impact. But I'll tell you what, it's been 11 years and you haven't seen me cry. When this moment comes, I will point myself out to you. And sure enough, when Donnie Yen dies, I was crying. And I kind of looked over at my wife and put my hand, and she looked at me and she's like, are you okay? Like, she was like, I said, yeah, I'm fine. I'm like, I just love this part. And it makes me so sad because I love this character so much. Like, I could almost well up right now thinking about it. It is such a wonderfully built character and mini arc within the story, his love for his friend, his faith in the Force and in the cause, and his commitment to being a force for change and difference. He understands in that moment that no one else can do what he has to go do. And he also,
here's the question.
I think he knows he's going to die too.
Now, when he's first introduced and you realized he's sort of the personification of the Force, did you not know at that point he was going to die?
Well, I accepted when I first watched the movie, mistakenly so, that everybody was going to die, because I assumed, based on the Return of the Jedi scene that we were mentioning earlier with Mon Mothma, that all of these characters were going to die. So when I walked into Force or Rogue One, I assumed everyone was going to die.
In the movie too, right? I believe
she is in the movie, yes. Oh. So I had a mistaken assumption, but I kind of wish I didn't. I wish I had, because I'd love to be able to answer that question differently.
But you can't faithfully answer it.
I can't, because I think that your question is a great one, and I wish I could answer it faithfully, but I can't, because I walked into the movie assuming they were all dead from the beginning.
It was the mini Empire moment. It's like, if he's the personification of the Force, the hope slips through, but the Empire wins. And so I was expecting that. So I was expecting the personification of the Force. The Jedi, without being a Jedi, needed to die.
So are you commenting about, like, that's the way that the Empire wins, like a way that the dark side wins because he dies? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so like in a way they
like it's a dark side win.
They lose the war, I mean, and they won the battle. They just lost the war, and it was because of that moment they lost the war, but they still won the battle. I mean, you think about it, they took casualties, but they don't care about that.
Yeah. And the rebellion took huge casualties.
But, the strategic part of holding on to the plans is what they missed out on. But the rest of it, militarily, they won. It was a costly victory, but they won. But they had the resources to spare, where the Jedi the
rebellion
did not. Yeah.
All right, I think we're ready to bring this in. You have any other little things or big things you want to comment on how awesome Rogue One is?
No, I just feel really good talking about it. So
me too.
I'll say, if you want to see a good protagonist storyline, I think this is a good one for a movie.
And I tell you what, I, when watching that movie, pay very close attention to Cassian because I think he is very interesting. And I encourage you, if you have not seen it, or if you haven't seen it since seeing it once a while ago, rewatch it and really pay attention to his performance. Is wonderful, first of all, but the character, like the character they've built in Cassian, is just fantastic. The one thing that I would argue that goes a little against the grain of what I think that character would do is when he does not shoot Galen. Like, I believe that what they had established that up to that point, I believe that he would have shot him. He was under orders.
It's kind of like going back in time and changing it so Guido shoots first moment. They just didn't want to do it, but it was appropriate. Okay, so for the world builder's task, which we don't normally do for these media episodes, but I'm going to do here, is if you create a world in a piece of fiction, whether it be a trilogy or something that works really well, that's awesome. And if you want to carry it on like the Wheel of Time and have 14 books off of the same story idea, that's awesome. I love that. But also, the thing that worked about Rogue One ultimately is the idea of they took the world building elements that have been established, but they looked at it from a different angle and took a different approach to the story. Mandalorian, same thing. I was afraid it was going to be, we're trying to tell the Boba Fett story without saying Boba Fett, because everyone's always wanted that since Empire. But it wasn't that story. It was a story that worked in the universe and made a lot of sense, but was separate, even though it could potentially wrap in. Who cares? It doesn't matter. The part that's important is that, if you could utilize your world, if you have a good world, you can sort of reframe it from different directions, and you might have to fill in some more details and add some more stuff in. But don't be afraid if the world works to use it from different angles. It doesn't always have to be trying to recreate the same formula every year or two. Sorry, Star Wars. Sorry, MCU. But they don't have to be the same every time. So there we go.
Well, I mean,
I enjoy both those.
It comes from making money, though, right? It works. It's safer. Everybody still loves it and still buys a ticket, so that's why it happens. But
enjoy complaining about it.
And I would be curious to see what kind of money Rogue One made by comparison to the other ones, because I don't know that.
That would take a Google, though. That would be too complicated.
I mean, that's such a big search. My point is that I wonder how it compares monetarily by taking that what I'm going to call a small risk in showing us a completely different perspective on a world that we're already familiar with.
I don't think you can completely fairly judge it because of the timing of when it came out, because it was was the first Star Wars movie. It was right before the release of the second one. It was in between the first and the second one and the sequel, I think. So it might have benefited a little bit or lost some from that. So,
from the timing of release, you mean?
Yeah, from the timing, because it was involved during the third trilogy at the beginning. I forget if it was. I think it was after the first one, but before the second one, I think. So that might have helped it or hurt it, depending on people's reaction to the first movie.
All right, guys. So go check out Rogue One and join the closed Facebook group. And if you're going to go do a little shopping on Amazon, if you go through our portal, it helps out the show. So www.garduel.com/Amazon. It's not going to change your prices or put you on crazy lists or anything. It's just going to help the show. We get a little piece of the action, and it takes a little money out of Amazon's pocket, which is fun.
Right. Especially like if you're really desiring to see the old Ewoks TV show, which we know you are. Go through our link. We won't tell anyone. We won't know it's you. Just buy it through our link, and you'll feel a little bit better.
Jeff is going to try to track your purchases, though. I'm kidding.
Everyone, have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.garduel.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.